Hello, everybody. I can't believe this is happening. This is so fun. I'm Chelsea Odhner, and I'm the Vice President of Publishing at the Swedenborg Foundation. Um, and I'm here to share with you my excitement about our new book, Opening the Inner World, Spiritual Healing, Internal Family Systems, and Emanuel Swedenborg. And bear with me, I'm not used to doing live streams, but I just wanted to get on because we've been having so much fun doing podcast interviews about this book with so many wonderful people who host amazing podcasts. And I've just created a playlist on our Swedenborg Foundation channel where you can see a collection of those that we've done so far. And I'll add the other ones when they come up. But that's one way to dip your toe into what this book is and offers. And the enthusiasm that I hear from these podcast hosts about our book is just so energizing and exciting that I just had to sort of bubble over and come on here and share with everybody. So I wanted to just introduce you to our book and spend a little bit of time with it. Like, here it is. It's a lovely book. It's available now on Amazon or on our product page on Swedenborg.com. I've got links for those in the description. So we've got some, I wanted to go through the structure of the book a little bit with you. It has a little author's preface where we give some notes about Swedenborg and an IFS, some introductory stuff. And then we have an introduction, and I want to go through the actual chapters of the book. And there's also a full bibliography. So we quote a lot from Swedenborg and other sources, and we've all have that all fully cited. And then we even created a fancy index at the back so you can find any particular term that you want to learn more about. But so what is this book? It has three authors, me, Jonathan Rose, who's a familiar name and face around here. He's the series editor for the New Century Edition. And the other name between the two of ours is Robert Falconer, and he's an IFS therapist, master teacher of IFS, and an IFS is internal family systems. So it's a psychotherapeutic approach that's been being developed since the 80s, and it's really sort of booming right now. And when I found IFS, probably like 3+ years ago at this point, it was enormously helpful for my healing journey. And what it was for me was that, I've been reading and studying Swedenborg, I mean, really my whole life, but I really dug into it for myself in my 20s. And then ever since then, and then I've been working at the Swedenborg Foundation for the last 10+ years. But I've been on this healing journey as well. And, everything Swedenborg says is amazing, but it's like, I always had this like, but why, then why do I still hurt so much? Like there's still so much pain and suffering and trauma in my system. So I would, I've done a ton of yoga, like meditation helps, all these sorts of things have helped me on my spiritual journey and healing journey. But when I found internal family systems, it was like such a game changer. And one of the key things about that is that IFS talks about it's really a paradigm shift in how it understands the mind. And so Richard Schwartz is the guy who initially developed it. And one of the key things was that our mind is multiple. He was coming from this family systems background, which is like, okay, how to make a shift, a transformational shift happen is you have to pay attention to all the parts in the system, in this family system. But what that was not considering was like the internal system for each individual. And so Dick Schwartz sort of went off on his own in applying some family systems theory stuff to people's own inner worlds, and then eventually developed internal family systems from there. And that's one of the key things he found was like when he was talking to his clients is that we all naturally talk in terms of parts, and we maybe just think it's all one big blob in there, but it's actually this a multiplicity of parts, and what IFS does is it actually just treats each of those parts with respect. You can have dialogues with those parts. They're in relationship with each other, and they're all a part of your overall wholeness. Um, and so, even though Swedenborg never says the word, the truth is Swedenborg's whole worldview is also coming from a place of understanding our minds as multiple, like this multiplicity. Um, and you kind of get a taste of that in terms of the levels that he talks about, like our inner self and our outer self, um, and then even all the parts of our outer self. And there's a ton of inner relationship going on. And so when I found IFS, it suddenly was like I could use everything that Swedenborg said literally in a therapy session, or with myself, working with my parts. Um, so it was just amazing to find that. And then that's what uh, inspired me, because what Swedenborg does is he talks about spirits, obviously, right? He's interacting with the spirits that are connected to the different parts of his body. Um, but these, uh, so when I found it, I was like, okay, IFS is talking about parts, Swedenborg is talking about spirits. What's up with this? What it really just invites you to, like, what are you really interacting with when you go inside? Um, and so as I was continuing to explore deeply in IFS, and eventually I got trained in IFS as a coach, um, I was so interested to see, is there anybody in the IFS world who is going to that level of not just a multiplicity of parts, but like our connection to the spiritual world inside of ourselves, which Swedenborg describes. And not long after, I'd been sort of holding this, like cradling this curiosity in my heart, and then found out that Robert Falconer, he just released his book that's called The Others Within Us, and it takes IFS, internal family systems, but connects it with what he calls porosity of mind, having to understand that when we go inside and meet our parts, it's also possible that we meet other things. We come to the uh, peripheries of where, as he describes it, like our mind has a semi-permeable membrane around it. Like you can imagine it that way. Like all living things have a membrane, a semi-permeable membrane, and so our mind is no different. And so instead of thinking that it's like concrete in there or something, you have to learn how to navigate these energies and influences that are going on all the time. And so his work uh, takes us there. And so when I heard about this book, I called Bob. Uh, well, I just literally reached out, cold called him by filling out the contact form on his website, um, and he responded. And I also ordered his book right away too. I had just found out about it, and uh, when I got it, it turned out he even had a section on Swedenborg in his book. And Wilson Van Dusen, and Jerry Marzinski. These, you've maybe seen videos of ours where we've on Off the Left Eye, where we've interviewed Jerry Marzinski. And we have books by Wilson Van Dusen in our bookstore. So it turns out Bob Falconer, this IFS therapist, has had this long tail history, really being interested in Swedenborg. And so when my request came along, being like, you're somebody who's heard about Swedenborg and knows IFS, can we talk about it? He was so excited. And when I asked, he was open and interested in creating this book together. And so what you'll notice is the book is, here's one example. I've retained our voices. So you see, you've got Jonathan, Chelsea, Bob over here. Like, what we ended up doing was, and Bob gave this suggestion, was for us to do recorded conversations. And I loved that. I had already had a long list of topics that I wanted to cover if I were to ever be able to explore IFS and Swedenborg together. And so when he gave me that possibility of us doing recorded conversations, I thought, like immediately my mind went to, I want to get Jonathan involved in this. Like if I could have Jonathan um, be, say yes to being a part of this book project, then Jonathan would bring the Swedenborg Latin scholarship, and Bob would be bringing this IFS, mastery, all this knowledge and expertise from years and years of teaching and doing it with clients, and his own exploration of porosity of mind. Um, and then me in the middle as like a little bridge, connecting my knowledge of Swedenborg, and by now my knowledge and study of IFS. And so we did, but so Bob and Jonathan hadn't ever met each other. And so it was really fun. We were just like, they were both in, they're both willing to do it. So we scheduled these conversations and recorded them. Each, they were 2 hours long. So I think it was total of 9 of them. And uh, and we just had the time of our lives. I mean, talk about getting to be like the fly on the wall. I was engaged in the conversations, but getting to connect with, pick Bob and Jonathan's minds about everything that's interesting to me about Swedenborg and IFS, uh, and then record it all. So then it was my job to edit it, and that took about a year. So this is not just a transcript, this is a fully edited text where it has a topical flow, which I'll get to, and um, but there was this like creative choice of, do I retain our voices, or do I sort of, mush it into a single voice that's sort of taking you through the material? Um, and it just really felt right to be like, nope, we got to keep our voices in here because they're so. Uh, we all three just felt like we wanted the energy and excitement of our conversations to come through in this book, and I also think it's just genuinely an easy and entertaining read, even though you're like, we're going into some wild territory in IFS and the mind and spirituality, the inner world. Um, and so, uh, and that's what we've heard so far from podcast hosts, is that they find it really enjoyable. And so, like, if you've ever struggled with reading Swedenborg, and you kind of want a primer for Swedenborg, especially one that is like written with an eye toward, how can this help? Like, how can this be useful to me right now in my life? Uh, this is such a good book for that, where we quote a lot from Swedenborg, but it's just couched in this accessible exploration, and totally, geeking out, energizing of Bob and Jonathan and me. We did not run out of things to talk about. We kept being like, oh my goodness, we need many books. And so what do we cover? So we've got, I'll give you a little, here's the lovely title page. So beautiful. Karen Connor is our graphic designer, and she was, did the cover and the typesetting of the interior. Okay, well, that was the title page, but I wanted to get to the table of contents. Okay, I'll just flash that before your eyes. So you'll see there's only 6. The way we ended up doing it is there's 6 chapters, but then with, oh my gosh, with subheadings here. Okay, so and so the table of contents, it really gives you a sense of what is covered in each of the chapters. And so you can, find what you're looking for and think about, what it is, what interests you. And so first, we've got our first chapter is Introduction to Internal Family Systems and Emanuel Swedenborg. So we go over the origin story of internal family systems and the origin story of Emanuel Swedenborg from all of, from Jonathan, Bob, and then my perspective. And we give an overview of the internal family systems model and an overview of Swedenborg's worldview. So like, that's why I really think this book, you don't have to, already have a degree or a practice in either of these things, Swedenborg or IFS. It really, we have the whole first chapter that is an intro to these ideas and really sets the stage, even if you are, super familiar with Swedenborg or IFS, it kind of sets you up to be thinking about these things in a kind of new way. And then chapter 2 is going inside, inner sense cultivation. So this we get to talking about like the one of the sections is the realness of our imagination. Um, and then even the somatic level of all of this, how it connects to your body and our physical senses, our spiritual senses. Then the next chapter is the relationship between parts and self. Um, and then the nature of burdens, again, from both of these perspectives, IFS and Swedenborg. And then we get to porosity and the inflow of spirits. So this is where, IFS, uh, or where Bob, he really talks about, he takes the further reaches of IFS, so IFS is this model is about interacting with your parts, but also your parts in relationship to what IFS calls your self with a capital S. Um, and then and that capital S self is really a lot like Swedenborg's inner self, and how Swedenborg talks about how we're all receiving this inflow of love and wisdom from the divine. And then, of course, Swedenborg is talking about interacting with spirits. And there was this, the spirits were in my left hip, or I felt them in my right ear, and he's having dialogues with them and everything. So there's a lot in this book to be explored about that porosity, as Bob Falconer calls it, or this inflow of spirits. How does that work? What are the different kinds of spirits? Because Swedenborg really seems to suggest there's spirits that are flowing into us all the time that are, um, uh, you don't notice it. It's like the bacteria on your skin, that you need it to survive, and yet you just think it's all a part of you. And so there's those spirits, but then obviously there's sort of the waking awareness of spirits. And certainly that's what Swedenborg experienced. Not everybody, experiences it that way either. And then the last chapter is the process of healing. And so really that's what the whole book is about. It's all about spiritual healing, but then we kind of really bring it together in the end to kind of cap it off. And so that's the book. And I had the thought to just read a little excerpt for you to sort of close us out here. But I'm happy to do more of these little live streams where I could read sections of this book. So especially if you're watching and you noticed, one of the chapters or the sections that really stood out to you, go ahead and comment that. If you want to hear, from one of the parts of the book, I will hop back on here sometime and read an excerpt from different sections if that's what you want to hear. And so let me read this, and then I've got a little surprise announcement at the end as well. So this is in our section. Well, it's page 99 in the book. We're talking about our sense of identity and really these inner relationships, and how what's involved in the parts of us coming into relationship with this inflow of the divine. And there's a lot of factors in that. If it was totally simple, we'd all be just getting to enjoy it all the time, but that's obviously not what happens. So this is me speaking. So Chelsea, another factor, which is sort of a nuance of freedom and choice, is what I would call willingness or openness or consent. When parts are blended, which means you're sort of seeing the world through the eyes of the part, we can ask parts to unblend in IFS, and very often they are willing to. Then once the part has unblended, you then get to know the part, and you can connect the part to self and the self to the part. There's a detail in that process that I've found to be true in my experience of IFS that Swedenborg puts his finger on. He says it's about turning. So this is True Christianity 491, subsection 2. The Lord flows into every one of us with spiritual heat, which is essentially the goodness of love, and spiritual light, which is essentially the truth of wisdom. How open we are to these qualities depends on which way we are turned, either toward God or toward ourselves. So that's the end of the quote. And then I continue speaking. When I'm getting to know parts, it very often is a matter of whether they are willing to turn toward the self or not. Are they willing to turn toward me? For the ones that aren't willing, you just have to be there with them for a long time before they're willing to turn. But so often the relationship really gets started and begins to bloom when the part of its own free will decides to turn toward the self. So that's a useful technique in IFS to ask a part to turn toward the self and look and see, which Swedenborg spells out here in spiritual terms. Someone reading Swedenborg may think he's being abstract, but there's a spiritual reality to it when you do inner work with IFS. And you'll just have to take my word for it right now, but as you explore this deeply, and if you practice any IFS with yourself or with a therapist, you can keep that in mind because it really is a powerful um, element. This idea of either turning toward God or toward ourselves, and I think that is like this openness to be in relationship. But in your with your inner sight or energetically inside, you can feel the difference between a part that's turned away, that's just like focused on what's making it anxious, or whatever its thoughts and feelings are, its experience, versus this openness that usually has to happen from um, an extension of a sense of safety or like love, compassion toward the part that even invites it to turn to say, there's another way of looking at this, or, you could feel safe with me or feel this love. And when that invitation happens and the part turns of its own free will, it can just, really amazing transformation can happen where the part then feels connected and maybe has a new perspective on things. It's just really powerful work. So that is a little glimpse into opening the inner world. And I'll just read it off the back. Richard Schwartz, who's the founder of IFS, gave us a very generous review of the book. And one little excerpt. We quote the whole thing in this advanced praise section at the beginning, but what we have on the back is, for those interested in the spiritual side of IFS, Swedenborg points to worlds we have yet to explore. So I think it's true. It's a never-ending journey. Um, and so, yeah, if you can get the book, it's on Amazon. This is when it would be really great to have people write Amazon reviews for us on it to help it succeed. We already were the number one new release in actually religious encyclopedias, encyclopedias, and study guides, subject guides. That's what it was. So we were the number one new release in religion subject guides, and so we can keep that going. And the other thing I wanted to say, the sort of announcement that you maybe have heard about already, is that I'm going to be leading and facilitating a retreat in person in August, this August, the 8th to the 10th. And it's on the East Coast in a place called Phillipsburg, New Jersey. And it's called the Inflow Retreat. And there's also a link in the description to that, to all the information on our website. And the whole idea of this Inflow Retreat is to take basically these ideas in this book. You don't have to have read the book yet or anything to come and just experience the weekend, but the book is definitely informing my facilitation and the exercises and sort of the whole program of the weekend. So it'll involve some learning about Swedenborg's concepts of inflow, and really taking this and getting to experience it for yourself in the moment, in the here and now, which honestly is what was the most transformative thing for me. Swedenborg talks about this inflow of divine love, and it sounds nice, but if you check inside yourself, like, do you feel love? Do you feel loved right now? Like, are you feeling that? Chances are maybe not. If you are, yay. But if you're not, there's a way to actually connect in with that. Um, and and even in this moment, like if you want to join me for a second, because the truth is you can do it by conjuring a sense of even just thinking of somebody you love, somebody who really just, you know, no no baggage. It just really genuinely feels like the most pure, delightful love and joy when you think of this person. It just makes your heart sing. Even if maybe there's complication there, but there's just this love for this person. And when you do that and let that be there, you can think, just notice what's happening in your body. What are you feeling differently? Because there's actually a different felt sense to feeling this inflow of love in your body. And if that is difficult for you, and it makes sense if it is, uh, and it certainly was for me, was like the first time that I realized when I took that love that I could feel for somebody else, and then I imagined applying it to myself, it just, was just this recognition of how much I felt so unworthy of love. And uh and so in IFS, that's a part of myself that is holding that belief of an unworthiness of love. And then that gets, rather than feeling just lost that, oh well, that's just it, that's just the truth, of my existence, is that I'm unworthy of love. Actually, this that place of the loving that I was feeling inside and extending toward myself, that actually then gets to be in a relationship, and you can learn and understand, this unworthiness that a part of you might be feeling if you're having an experience like I was having. Um, and and again, I just gave like the littlest taste, and that can be transformative in itself. But if you want a couple days of that, come to the inflow retreat, from August 8th to 10th. And then also, just it's such a journey. Like, I think this is what we are, it's such an important healing process, is to learn to really feel and open up to this experience of love inside of yourself, and finding all the parts of yourself that have maybe felt closed off for one reason or another to that love. And that is what I see as the spiritual healing journey that we're all on, that IFS points to and Swedenborg points to. Like, as Bob says in the book, these two perspectives that are shining a light, each from their own vantage point, but then it reveals the truth of the underlying reality that's there. So that's what this book explores. That's what we're exploring on this weekend. There's uh, still space, so I encourage you to register if you want to come be together in person. And yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, or let me know what you want to hear more about IFS or Swedenborg, and I'll come back. All right, thank you so much. Bye.